I see is not real. All I touch, I cannot feel. All I have will fade away. All I speak, I'll never say.
I feel like I have changed dimensions or come to a parallel universe. 2 days ago, after having dinner and going to sleep, I wake up early morning and look outside my bedroom window. The buildings, which I could see from my room, seemed to have changed their positions, as if they got shifted from what they once used to be, and there is a subtle difference now in the surroundings. There is also a huge parabolic satellite antenna on my neighbor's rooftop, which was not there before, but it doesn't look like it has been installed new. Rather, it looks old and worn out, with pieces falling apart. I felt very light and was as if something had changed dramatically, but I had no energy to resist a change. It took me an hour to come to senses and start getting ready for work, as I could not accept the fact that something as major as this had happened. I tried checking my phone calls and emails to see if it's the same, and it looks the same. But then, I also don't have a perfect memory. What if everything is not the same, and I am not in the same world? There are subtle changes like this which have been eating me away for the last 2 days. I am also worried that if something like this has truly happened, then what about the world I was living in? What happened to me over there? If I left that place, then who is there in my place? Or have I completely left it and no longer exist? What about the people around me, my friends and family? What happened to them? Until now, I had only considered these things as fantasy and make-believe stuff shown in the movies for entertainment. But after that day, I feel different. I feel weird. My family used to contact me every day regardless of whether some event was there or not. But since the last 2 days, they have not contacted me. I messaged, and I got a small response, which was weird, considering how talkative they are. I don't think things are the same, even though they look like it. I can still see the changed position of the buildings from my window, and it looks like they have always been like this. My roommate says that I have been speaking loudly and getting up at night while sleeping, which has never happened before. Or maybe I'm tired of working so much, and it has taken a toll on me. I don't know. I just tell that to myself to convince myself that everything is fine. Thank you for listening to this. I just wanted to let it out, as there was nobody to talk about stuff like this. I have thought for the last 2 years that this event was a Mandela effect, but after finding this sub, I'm starting to think maybe it was a glitch. I'm hesitant to tell this story. No one believes it, even my husband who saw the whole thing. But here we go. My neighbors directly across the street from me. They're married and expecting a baby. The wife is a tiny blonde woman, very Caucasian, very tiny build. We wave to each other daily and yell salutations across the street. She goes into labor and they leave for the hospital. A week later, I see the car has returned, so I bake some cookies and take them over and congratulate them. Another day or two goes by and I see a thick, brunette lady outside with a baby, and I wave, assuming it's a relative that's come to help with the newborn. A few more days pass and I see the husband outside with the brunette and the baby. So I take the cookies over. It's her. It's the wife. Same name, same personality, and the same demeanor, except she's now a thick, kinda tall, brunette Pacific Islander. The husband doesn't acknowledge any difference. She talks to me and treats me the way she always has, but it's totally a different person. My husband noticed as well. We made some jokes about him wife swapping at the hospital, but since he can't wrap his brain around it, he starts to believe that she's always been this person, even though he clearly remembers her, teeny and blonde. I feel like everyone has lost their minds. It's been almost 2 years since that shift, and she's still a thick, tall brunette. And then I feel like maybe I've lost my mind. My only consolation is that my husband remembers it too, if only vaguely. Update 1. So I showed the picture I found of her to my husband last night. He's a little bit of a mess about it. The man is not a conspiracy guy at all, but he remembered her. He started asking some questions and tossing around ideas about what could have happened. I convinced him to go to the church this morning and attend their service. I spoke briefly with the pastor and said my neighbor had recommended that I attend. He was grateful she was sending people his way, even though, get this, she hadn't attended since she had the baby. She apparently changed churches to one a little closer when she gave birth. So, I don't know where to go next except for putting some feelers out in the neighborhood and finding an excuse to hang out with her. Update 2. I didn't want to update until I had spoken directly to my neighbor, so I endured the heat all week and spent way too much on flowers to plant in an attempt to run into my neighbors. The old lady next door doesn't remember the neighbor's wife having blonde hair, but her middle-aged daughter does. She said, "Yeah, that was a couple of years ago." I don't know why she went so dark. I thought it would wash her out. When I pointed out that it wouldn't wash her out because her complexion is tan now, she looked confused and said that maybe she had been tanning because she did look darker. I pushed it a little further and asked if she also seemed taller, but she seemed stuck on the fact that the very Caucasian blonde woman had gotten tan enough for such dark hair to look natural. She gave me several reasons, but didn't seem convinced either. I also spoke to the changed lady's next door neighbor and mentioned her having blonde hair. Neither he nor his wife remember her ever being blonde. They both agreed she had dark hair on move-in day. Yesterday I finally cornered changed neighbor lady outside. She pulled up with groceries and I offered to help carry them with her. I started talking about the church and how I had spoken with the pastor. She said some really nice stuff about the church, also that she needed a church closer. That's why she'd switched. When I pointed out that her new church was actually further away, she said she had never actually measured it, but it seemed closer. I pointed out that her old church was in our town, and her new church is in the next town over. And she said the back roads must make it seem shorter. Some red flags popped up here because the back roads around here are long, windy roads that circle around our town and pass by all the farmland. It doesn't ever make things quicker. It's a nicer drive, sure, but it always adds a good chunk to the drive time. Also, the new church is in the middle of the town, 2 streets over from Main Street, so if you take the back roads, you actually have to circle back to get on the main roads to get to it anyway. It would be much more convenient to take a direct route using the town roads that connect the 2 towns. It's almost a straight shot from the middle of our town to the next town over. I don't know why that bothered me, but it did. After a little while of small talk, I brought up the hair. I said that I was trying to go blonde to hide some grey that I have coming in. And did she have any tips? She laughed and said the last time she was blonde, she was in high school, and that was a mess, so she wouldn't recommend it. I pointed out that she was blonde right before having her baby, and she got really weird, almost offensive, and said she hadn't. She had only tried to go blonde that one time in high school, and it turned orange, so she dyed it back immediately. I told her I chalked it up to pregnancy brain because she was definitely blonde while she was pregnant. She ended the conversation shortly after and thanked me for my help, but you could tell she was annoyed with me. So, guys, not super sure what I learned, other than the girl next door to me, the old lady's daughter, and I are going to have another chat. She made me feel like she remembered, but she couldn't wrap her head around it. I'm going back to the church on Sunday to poke around and talk to some more people. Anyone else have something so blatant happen? "2 weeks ago, my father passed away unexpectedly. I believe I have fallen into another universe since then. I meet with a close friend weekly to work on a creative project together. We meet at the same restaurant each week. Before my father died, the restaurant had a wall lined with jars of Caesar dressing and vodka sauce. I know this because I specifically examined the jars the week before my dad's death and pointed out the calorie content of the vodka sauce. In an attempt to regain some normalcy, I met with my friend the week after. The walls were now lined with Caesar dressing and tomato basil soup. This would be innocuous enough if I hadn't specifically examined the jars the week before. I spoke with the staff and they informed me they have never sold vodka sauce and have always sold the tomato soup. I feel the shock of my father's passing caused me to shift into a parallel reality. Am I crazy? Around 2003 or 2004, I worked as a projectionist in a movie theater in Middletown, Connecticut. As a projectionist, back when actual 35mm film was loaded into projectors, before theaters went all digital. Generally, after you started the last show of the evening, there wasn't very much else for you to do until the film ends. So often I'd go downstairs to help the other staff clean up, talk, eat leftover popcorn, and just generally goof off. One evening, we decided to buy a Super Bowl from one of the vending machines in the small arcade in the lobby. In case you don't know exactly what a Super Bowl is, it's a small rubbery ball, maybe about 3 centimeters in diameter. If you throw them against a wall or something, they just seem to bounce around the room forever. So, we took the ball and decided we'd try to throw it as hard as we could against the floor to see if we could make it hit the ceiling of the lobby, which was quite high. Attempting this was indeed a challenge. You had to really slam the ball against the floor to have any chance of reaching the ceiling, and we could never seem to quite hit it. Close, but not quite. But we weren't giving up so easily. We became determined to prove this was possible. Now, the floor of the lobby was a hard tile floor, so just as you'd expect, this Super Bowl would bounce off the floor and launch really high into the air. That's basic physics, right? Who would ever expect a different result? Well, on my next attempt of bouncing this ball up to the ceiling, physics apparently didn't apply. I took the ball in my hand as usual and slammed it as hard as I could against the floor, and the ball, for lack of a better explanation, stopped dead when it hit the floor. It just froze. Not even the slightest hint of a bounce. It hit the floor and seemed to stick to it, and very slowly roll away, as if all inertia and force were just sucked right out of it. This was witnessed by 3 or 4 other employees, and every one of us just kind of stared at the ball slowly rolling away in disbelief. How was this possible, we wondered? Super Bowls don't do that. We got the ball and tried again, and again and again. The ball hit the floor and flew up high in the air every time we tried bouncing it, as physics would normally dictate. Just for that one time, physics refused to work as expected. Reality seemingly glitched out for a second. This was a mystery, and we explored lots of ideas for how this could have happened. I mentioned the floor was tile, so I thought maybe the ball hit a gap in the tiles in just the right way to make this impossible throw happen. The tiles are about 30 centimeters square with a small gap of grout between them. But there's no way that the ball hitting the gap could explain it. If anything, it would have just made the ball bounce up at an angle or something. We checked the tiles. Was anything unusual about them? Loose, maybe? No, not loose. Was there some sticky dried cola residue on them? It was a movie theater lobby after all. Nope. Tiles were clean and dry. How about the ball? Did it have some spot that was softer or something? No, that wasn't it. Even years later, when I recall the incident, I tried to think of any logical explanation that could have caused the ball's odd behavior that evening. I have never been able to come up with a reasonable explanation. Super Bowls simply don't do that. Manny, shortened from Manouche, was my first full-time dog, a rescued 2-year-old American Staffordshire Black Labrador mix that went through hell before he landed in our home. The pound staff said he came into their care with a shoelace or string around his neck so tight he could barely breathe. He was severely underweight and also had a very pronounced scar along his back that belied much more violence plagued him in his short life. What the staff deliberately failed to mention was that he had heartworm, demodectic mange, secondary bacterial dermatitis, and tertiary yeast infection on his skin and in his ears. I don't note all of this for the sake of pity porn, but to note this boy had been through a lot, and I know firsthand, when you make it past the cusp of death alive and well, you have access to certain abilities, talents if you will. I have a whole suite of stories to share about our experiences, good and bad, but for brevity's sake, I'll tell this one account, since it's the one another human and 2 other dogs witnessed. Manny was 7 or 8 at this point, and he was, for all intents and purposes, my familiar and a trusted homeboy that took damn good care of his property and would not try to escape even if the gates were open. Seriously, we once got back from a day out to find Manny sitting on the front porch with a shit-eating grin on his face, gates wide open. Any other of our dogs would have fannied off after the first cat, squirrel, or noise that caught their interest. Anyway, it was a Saturday, and my partner and I were out to lunch and shopping and whatnot. I had recently purchased fresh beef bones for all 3 of ours, a dainty venison shank for my youngest 10-month-old girl, a big 8-inch beef shank for Manny, and a giant femur bone for my partner's girl / my goddaughter, Rachel. Now, one of Manny's quirks was that he was profoundly orally fixated. Since he would shred and eviscerate and eat any stuffed animal we got him, beef bones became the one thing he could work with, and would generally carry one around with him most of his life. He accepts his new baby excitedly, but promptly noticed that Rachel was getting a much bigger bone than him. I saw him give her his signature frozen glare while she dug into it in her kennel, which her dad securely latched shut before we left. Manny didn't budge. Think the Rottweiler from The Omen. And I laughed at him and half-jokingly asked my partner, "Want to bet he has Rachel's bone by the time we get back?" My partner, Ben, snorted and said, "No way that thing can fit through any of the kennel gaps." I shrugged and gave Manny an encouraging pat on the head, told my girl, Rue, short for Ruxana, goodbye, and we were off. The time out was blandly pleasant, I guess, because I couldn't remember much other than wandering through a couple of stores and having lunch I paid for. We roll up the driveway, make it to the door, and hear the characteristic clicks, sniffs, and shuffles excited dogs produce when their humans return home. Always a good thing. It's when you hit dead silence that you need to worry. We enter, and sure as shit, death and taxes. There's Manny waving around Rachel's mega bone in his mouth, basically gloating and showing off to Dad. Ben just gaped, while I swooned with pride and congratulated Manny. Ben rushed over to Rachel's kennel in the bedroom, and it was as he left it, securely latched, with no obvious means of passing a giant bone like that through it. I was hugging and cackling for a good 3 minutes, with Manny soaking it up enthusiastically. No way he would give it up now, so we quietly slipped Rachel his shank, which she bitterly accepted. So what happened? We had no indoor cameras, so no one but Manny or Rachel can say for sure. And Manny departed our mortal plane in early March 2020, just before the pandemic kicked the planet in the taint. He's buried in our front yard, and I swear, he's still guarding us well. There have been times during 2020 and 2021 where I heard him growl or bark, and I'm the only one hearing it. Zero reaction from my living dogs. I would look out toward his grave and see random homeless or drug addicts trespassing up the driveway, looking for delivered packages or a place to piss or God knows what. Of course, I promptly would scream them off the property and give a silent prayer and thanks to Manny. He'll make a fine psychopomp for me when my time comes. I apologize if this doesn't make sense, but I'm freaked out and have no idea how to explain this. My co-worker and I were driving back from dinner to the place we were staying at. We had driven this route a handful of times and were very familiar with the surrounding area. It was a 7-minute drive from the restaurant to where we were staying. Okay, so we left the restaurant and had a straight drive for about 2 miles, no turns, until we had to take a right turn into the parking area of the property we were staying at. As we approached the hotel, the tall Courtyard by Marriott sign was visible, as was the building. We were a block away from the turn, and then we just suddenly weren't. We were all of a sudden driving on a highway, about to take the exit on the right. It was immediately apparent, and I said to my coworker, "Wait, something is wrong here." And he replied, "Yeah, what the hell just happened? We were just about to turn into the parking area." I told him to pull over, and I looked up on maps where we were. The map showed we were 20 minutes away, in the opposite direction we had come from. It was physically impossible, and the time on the clock was still the same as it was when we were next to the hotel. I don't understand, and neither does he, and he doesn't want to tell anyone because it sounds so crazy. We teleported 20 minutes away. It was the single, most disorienting feeling I've ever experienced. But now after that, I feel like everyone in my life has just changed. Everyone feels so distant. I can't shake the feeling that something is still really very off. Please help. When I was 19, I worked at Walmart in a festival town. I was a cart pusher, and in the summer the store would get overrun with festival goers. On this week, many years ago, there was a hippie music festival going on. The venue was very large, and the population of this small Midwestern town would swell by several thousand people. I remember that I was walking away from the store to gather shopping carts, donned in my blue vest of honor, and there were 2 or 3 young women about my age walking towards the store to enter. They were obviously festival goers, and all donned out in their hippie-esque regalia. I saw this blonde girl from about 20 feet away, and something about her just struck me with a massively intense feeling of familiarity. We began to walk slowly past one another, and we locked eyes and could not stop looking at one another. Then she stopped, pulled away from her friends, walked up to me and said, "I know you. Where do I know you?" I told her I was experiencing the exact same feeling. We stood there for 20 minutes while her friends became impatient and tried to recall past towns we had both lived in, or people who we both might mutually know. But nothing in our histories lined up, like not whatsoever in the least. She was from a different state entirely. There was no crossover whatsoever. Eventually we gave up and went our separate ways. I was a far less confident and socially awkward man then, and I should have gotten her Facebook or number, but I did not. I'm 34 now, and I still think about her all the time and wonder very deeply about who the hell she was, or how we could have felt so strongly about one another, with no apparent connection. Okay, so I go to the grocery store around 6-ish to pick up food for the week. I use the self-checkout and I'm walking straight towards the automatic doors to leave, and a couple walks in. The girl catches my eye because she has a very detailed tattoo of a dragon on her thigh. I admire the tattoo for a second, just as she slightly stumbles on the floor mat, which causes her glasses to fall off her face and onto the floor. She bends down to pick them up and proceeds past me. I get home, cook my meals, which takes an hour or so. I go into my bathroom and my cat has knocked over my toothbrush, which is now being chewed by my dog. I have no extras, so I hop back into my car to go back to the grocery store for a toothbrush. It is around 8ish. I grab the toothbrush, but this time I have to go to a regular register because the self-checkout is closed. My route to the doors is different this time. I have to walk down an aisle in front of the registers and the doors are to my right. Just as I'm getting to the door, the exact same couple walk in. The dragon tattoo is a dead giveaway. The girl then stumbles on the floor mat, drops her glasses, and kneels down to pick them up. No expression, nothing. I felt so confused. I got back in my car and just thought of the sheer amount of coincidences that just happened. I see this couple once. The girl drops her glasses and picks them up. My dog just so happens to chew my toothbrush, causing me to come back to the grocery store hours later. Somehow this couple not only needed to come back to the store, but do so at the exact time as me where we met, in the exact place and manner. I just now have a different point of view. Then the cherry on top, the girl stumbles and drops her glasses. Again. Shit was weird. Hey guys, weird happening here. About 2 weeks ago I was feeling off, like I was going to have a heart attack or going to pass out or throw up. I don't have insurance at the moment, so I decided I would sleep it off. My daughter's favorite toy was on the couch when I came out to the living room. It is a blue dinosaur plushie she takes everywhere with her. Well, I scooted it over on the couch and started watching TV, hoping I would pass out. I grabbed her toy and had it in my hands to distract me. I eventually fell asleep and woke up the next day. My girlfriend and kid were gone, and I got up to get some water. I looked down on the floor and thought, shit, she forgot her toy, she's gonna have a fit. Then it hit me. Instead of the dark blue toy I see all the time, it was bright green. Now, I'm not crazy. She's had it for a year now, and when I had asked her, what should we name it, I even said we should name it Blue. She throws a fit about the toy constantly and says, I want my blue dinosaur. I want my blue dinosaur. So I know for a fact this thing was blue. I thought maybe she had a second dinosaur similar, and I'm not crazy. Then my girlfriend calls me asking if her toy was still at home. I asked, the blue dinosaur? She replied, no, the green one she has all the time. I said, well, what about the blue one? To which she responded, there is no blue one. What are you talking about? My head started to spin. I started reading online about theories on our consciousness traveling to another dimension when we die because I admit I was having a bit of death anxiety after that night. I usually have panic attacks or anxiety, but this was way different. Anyways, I started looking into theories about souls and consciousness and came across that one and how it lays within the parameters of infinite universes and small things in people's lives changing after an accident, near-death experience, etc. I'm not convinced I died, but something weird definitely happened that night, and now I have this bright green dino making me question everything I know. Just for clarification, I have not had COVID recently. I don't have any gas in my home. My water heater is gas, but it's outside in a closed area. And I have a CO2 detector in my apartment, so I think I'm solid regarding that. And I don't take any medications or anything of the sort. Now, I was never the type of guy that believed in parallel universes or multiple dimensions. But after a strange experience and years of research, I have begun to wonder about the possibilities of such things existing. My change in mind occurred after a strange experience 5 years ago. I remember that date clear, 6th of September 2016. It was the day after I had moved into my new house, which I still live in today. It's a fairly old house and I've experienced many odd things, though those are different stories. The home was built 1974 to 1976 and was completed in late September of that year. It's had a few owners, one of which was my father's former boss. It's been kept in very good condition and retains many of its original features. Right, the story goes like this. It was our second day in the house, and our first night in the house I woke up early, around 7 p.m-ish to help unpack boxes and our items. We were also moving items out of the house which belonged to the previous owner. I was loading a box labelled silverware from our old green car, which was a 1995 Honda Odyssey. The box was heavy and I lost some grip on the box. Luckily, I have a quick reflex and quickly reacted and nudged the box back into my hands using my knee to prevent myself from dropping it. It was when I looked up again, things appeared differently. The first thing, which was hard for me not to notice considering the box was right in front of my eyes, was the word silverware. It had completely been replaced with the word records and books in a vivid black. I was confused at first and simply dismissed it as my bad eyesight. It was not until I leant down to place the box down on the lawn temporarily to close the car door that I realized that something was completely different, and it wasn't my eyes playing up. The car, the distinctive green 1995 Odyssey, was gone, and instead was replaced with a red Ford pickup truck. In complete utter shock, I quickly hurried into the house to find my father. I don't know why, and have no clue what I would have told him. When I hurried into the hall, I spotted a figure walking into my parents' bedroom. He was tall and young, maybe 35 to 45 in years, and around 5'8". He wore a brown suit. It almost looked like a tweed suit. He himself hurried down the hall quickly, so I quickly followed this man in confusion. When I walked down the hall, I noticed the carpet was cleaner, and the stain I had noticed earlier near my bedroom was gone. Perhaps if I hadn't been in such a frenzy, I would have noticed other changes. Anyways, I swiftly walked into my father's room. It was right at that moment when everything went back to normal. The man disappeared and boom, I nearly toppled my father as I walked right into him when entering his room in which the man had entered. We were so close I could feel his breath. "Whoa, buddy, slow down," I remember him clearly state. He was clearly as confused as I was. When I told him what I saw, we both walked outside, and there the green Odyssey sat, parked under our willow tree. The box where I left it, and the car door open. My father quickly dismissed the situation. I cannot explain what occurred in those brief moments, and probably will never fully understand what occurred on that warm September day. My father doesn't have an explanation for what happened that day. He recounts that day as well. From his perspective, he remembers clearing some boxes, standing near the sliding doors of his bedroom when he saw the same man walking away from the door. I find it odd that the man was walking in two completely opposite directions. He got curious and followed, in which then I came storming in, falling into my dad's chest. I've told my family multiple times this story. None really believe me. It has sort of become a dinner table story for them. I truly believe I was briefly transported into a different era. I can't confirm it, and perhaps if I had a phone back then, I could have taken a photo or two. I was 15, my parents were the type of parents who disapproved of young teens having phones. Whether it was a time slip, a glitch in the matrix, or my mind playing tricks, this experience will remain in my memories for years. I saw my dead father driving a car. I was 11 at the time he died. When I was a kid, he would tell me that once I got taller, he'd get me to play 8-ball pool with him. This never happened because he died before I was even 5'4". Fast forward to last Saturday night. I was playing 8-ball pool with my friends. At one moment, the memory of him telling me that once I got told he'd get me to play with him crossed my mind, and I sort of wished we would have got to play. Didn't pay much attention though. On our way back to our homes, being on foot, we were walking on the road but made room for cars to pass whenever they approached us. Once we were about 3 blocks away from my house, I saw a car passing, with my father as the driver. I'm so sure it was him. I've seen his dead body, so he can't be alive. And even if he was, why would he be driving in our neighborhood? I almost screamed and wanted to start running so as to catch the car, but I figured out it would be pointless. I even thought of throwing my phone at the car so as to catch his attention. I kind of regret it now. I'm not sure. Honestly, it's not like I miss him like hell and think of him 24/7, so I don't think my mind would make this up. Anyone experienced anything similar? I should be dead, but I woke up and things are different. I dreamt I was in a car accident on February 20th, 2022. I was driving down a bendy back road I take when traffic gets bad. No one takes it besides some older locals because it's out of the way and, when the weather's bad, dangerous. This country road follows along a steeper hill, which, at the bottom, is a river. Maybe 25-30 feet at its deepest point. I've fished there off and on since I was a kid. We had a small storm roll in on the 20th. It wasn't forecast, nor had I seen any clouds that suggested the weather shift. It was sudden, and I was on the back road. I was on my way home from work, almost 5 p.m. when the weather finally shifted. I didn't think much of it. I'd driven in worse. A lot worse, actually. But I still slowed down a bit as I rounded the sharper curves in the road. I had my favorite playlist going, one my partner and I made together a few months into our relationship. Her favorite song was playing, Eugene by Arlo Parks. I was on the second to final curve in the road when it happened. A big Ford truck, an F-150, flew around the curve, his headlights on high as he came into my lane. I remember jerking the steering wheel. I remember the force of the truck hitting the front driver's side of my car and sending me spinning. I remember the screech of metal on metal as I slammed into the guardrails. I remember not having control over my shitty old 2008 Mazda Tribute. My car smacked into trees and through vegetation as it tumbled and rolled down the hill before it finally splashed into the river. It took me several seconds to come to realize I was sinking and that water was flooding my car. I tried moving. I knew I needed to get out and fast, but my legs were pinned by the steering wheel. My jeans were torn and I could see the muscle and bone of my thighs. I remember trying to get myself free, pushing against the wheel, grabbing onto the passenger seat and pulling myself and screaming at the pain it caused. I remember looking through my cracked windshield and seeing the water just beginning to darken as my car sank. The water was rising in my car. It was freezing cold against my skin. I kept trying to get free, to force the steering wheel to move, to pull my legs out from under it. I remember thinking of my partner, of my brothers, my niece, of my father, of the kids I work with. I remember thinking, this is how I'm going to die, without saying goodbye. That's when I looked for my phone. It was in my cup holder before the crash. By the time I found it, it was on the passenger's side floor. I reached for that damn thing for what felt like ages, but couldn't have been longer than a few seconds. By some miracle, the screen lit up when I pressed the power button. I remember the relief that flooded my chest when it did. At this point, the water was moving up past my waist. I called my partner, but it went to voicemail. It made me want to cry, but I spoke anyway. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about the water, or the pain, or the cold. All I could think about was her. I told her I wasn't going to make it to dinner, and that I was sorry. I told her I wished I could make it up to her someday, but that I wasn't sure I'd get a chance to. I told her I loved her more than anything in this world. Something I've always said. I told her I wish I had gotten a chance to show her the Grand Canyon, a trip we had talked about for months, that I wanted to see her, get another chance to hold her. I wanted to say so much more, but the line beeped and the call ended as the water reached my neck. I remember crying to myself, trying to think of something else I could do to get out of this, to survive. But the water kept rising, and in the end, I simply stared up through it at the faint flashing light at the surface, blue and red. I prayed as the air began fighting to escape my lungs, as the pain pulsed through my skull and chest. I prayed until I couldn't anymore. I prayed until my vision went black and I couldn't fight to hold my breath any longer. And then I woke up, alone in bed, freezing with a cold sweat, but awake and confused. I don't know how or why I am here, because I died. I felt my body die. I felt the water enter my lungs and the pain that it caused. I felt it all. From the first impact of the truck, to my legs being pinned, to drowning. I shouldn't be here. This happened several years ago at a TGI Fridays in Killeen, Texas. I was eating with my family when we saw our friend Jesse sitting at the bar across the restaurant. Jesse is easy to spot, with broad shoulders and a distinct widow's peak, and he was even wearing a green striped shirt, such as he often wore. We called out to him, but he didn't hear us. Some guy he was sitting with noticed and told him we were trying to get his attention. So Jesse started walking towards us, and it was only when he came within about 10 feet of us did I realize it really wasn't him. He was almost identical, but not quite. Of course, this poor guy looked very confused to be summoned to a table full of strangers. Embarrassed, I apologized and explained that we had thought he was our friend Jesse. He was understanding, but then explained that his name was Jesse. So it had been extra confusing that we seemed to know him, but he didn't know us. It was some time later that we were eating again at TGI Fridays, when I caught sight of a server and immediately smiled and raised my hand to greet her. I knew her very well, not as a server, but as someone significant enough in my life that I'd actually hung out with. As she seemed to look right through me, I put my hand down and figured I was wrong. But I was so confused because the feeling had been so strong that I knew who she was. It drove me crazy, but there was nothing I could do. She turned out to be our server. She took my dad's order first, and then when she turned to me, her eyes widened and she said, "I know you. How do I know you?" We went through every possible scenario we could think of and never could figure out how our paths had crossed. And I can guarantee you, they just had not. We covered all bases, and even if we had passed each other in a store or something, it would not explain the intense familiarity we both felt. I begin to joke about the mysticism of that particular TGI Fridays. After the double Jesse experience, two friends of mine, each in an unrelated event, encountered other doubles and told me about it. I told them we were going to start calling it Doppelganger Fridays. Of course, this all seems like pure coincidence, but it's just interesting that it keeps happening at the same place. I've had a few experiences where I'm convinced I glitched, but this recent one freaked me out. Let's start with, I do no drugs, not weed, nothing. I do not even drink. I have to let you know this because the story makes me feel like I should have been. I have lived in my neighborhood for 43 years. I take the same route, to and from, every day. As a child, my mother walked us to school on this route. So needless to say, I know every street in the neighborhood. About 3 months ago, I had to go to work, so I went to the Little Caesars, got my pizzas and my daughter, and I headed home. This is where it got unexplainable. I'm heading down, making it about 2 streets, and suddenly, There are buildings on those streets that I've never seen in my life. Then, the one factory-like building, I see these men in weird hats and suspenders unloading an old truck. But the truck looked very new. Basically a truck from the 20s. I keep driving, then I notice another factory, and these other men in the same type of clothes are unloading milk bottles. I look at my daughter and say, WTF? I pull over and get on my GPS. My GPS tells me I'm in the exact street I'm supposed to be on. So I put the GPS in the holster and make it a point to look at the streets. The street said the right name, so I was exactly where I knew I was. I get to the main roads and tell her we're going to turn around and head back the way we came. We make a left, and I turn around under the bridge, and as soon as I do that, everything is normal. My street is there, the factories are gone, it's just normal. During these strange happenings, I felt a weird uneasiness in the air. I was literally terrified, like when someone is watching you. My GPS had a lot of static, and my maps even looked weird. I don't know. Like I said, I have had other events, but this one definitely lasted the longest. I often drive that route on purpose now to make sense of what happened to us, but I've yet to get an explanation. The funny thing is, where I live back in the day, there were indeed a lot of factories in the city. I found pages about glitches and stuff like that, and had I not had this one last as long as it did, I would think someone like me was crazy or had some kind of narcotic or was drunk. I don't know. Maybe I will be so lucky again to experience this, because next time I'm stopping and asking what year or place I'm in and getting a flyer or something as proof that there's a glitch in this place we call life. My partner and I are visiting Oakland, California. It's our first day in town. We're walking around, window shopping and checking out the area when a random man approaches us. Hey, how's your visit gone? We assumed he was a homeless man just being kind, and with us being from the Midwest, it's probably not hard to tell we're not from the area. We respond with a generic, "Our day's been fine, thanks. And yours?" I can't remember the exact words said, but after answering, he stated that he met us yesterday. We laughed and said it wasn't possible. It's our first day in town. You must have confused us with someone else. He responded, "No, it was you two. You guys gave me an orange and we chatted for a few minutes." That definitely sounds like something we might do. But seriously, we had only just got into town. It definitely wasn't us. The man then proceeded to tell my partner, "You're from Missouri. You're wearing a blue Kansas City shirt." He said a couple of other things, but I was in shock, so I don't remember what he said after that. Anyways, this was accurate information. He had that exact shirt. He wasn't wearing it that day, but it was one that he wore all the time. We still, to this day, have no idea what that was. It makes my head hurt thinking about it. I went for a hike a couple of days ago, and I think I may have shifted, or am, in between two realities since. I think the shift happened in the woods. I swore I saw my sister's dog run over a hill in the distance and not come back, so I'm calling for her. My sister and dad ask me what I am doing. The dog is right in front of us, and always has been. I tell them what I saw and we laugh it off, that I saw what was happening in another reality. But nothing's been the same since. Like, my mum has been extra different to me. I'm visiting for a week. I live in a different state than my hometown. I asked for cupcakes, and she, for the first time ever, got dairy-free ones for me. I've been dairy-free for 8 years. Washed a towel and bedding for me with fragrance-free detergent. I've been using fragrance-free for 8 years, etc. My niece has been extra clingy to me, like crying that I'm leaving, while the last few times I visited, she was just like, "Okay, bye." So besides anything feeling different since hiking in the woods, I saw a bug in my bathroom on the radiator. I went to pick it up with a random bottle, and I swear to God, the minute the bottle touched the bug disappeared. That's why I'm wondering if I'm stuck or transitioning or something, where I'm seeing parts of one universe while being in another. Is this possible? I know it seems crazy. Is there any way to know? Anything I should worry about? This has happened several times when hiking in a specific general area, about 10,000 acres, in New Hampshire, US. Looking at my watch or noticing the position of the sun in the sky is hours later in the day than it should be. I can't explain the lost time. This area was settled by Abenaki in the old times. There is at least one artifact, bowl carved in a rock ledge near a waterfall, that was recorded by archaeologists. An Indian trail is shown on old maps. I found petroglyphs, and I suspect graves and other things. The area was settled by Europeans for a time, but they all left or died. There are only cellar holes and cemeteries now. It's all gone back to woods. There is a lot of iron in the bedrock. Compasses don't always work right. It seems to me that lightning hits some of the hills much more often than is typical, though I'm not any kind of expert in that field. I am experienced in hiking and camping in the woods. The amount of lightning scars on the trees is crazy in my opinion. I don't drink or use drugs, and I have never had lost time in any other place. This is the first time anything like this has ever happened, so I sought out this sub to see what you think. I was making tomato soup as a comfort food because I was coming down with a cold, and I tried to switch the stove on, but it didn't do anything whatsoever. I checked outside to make sure there was no problem with the gas and came back in and opened a window just in case there was some kind of gas fault so the room didn't fill up or something. I don't know what I was expecting. The stove was completely off. By the plug, no gas or electricity was running through it. And when I turned back from opening the window, my soup was piping hot, with steam and bubbling. I literally cannot begin to explain it, but there was no steam when I came inside. Turned to the window and turned back, and it was hot. I didn't see anything blurry or hear anything extraordinary. It was just done.
One day, at the beginning of this year, me, 26 years old, and my boyfriend, 26, went for a big walk around the town we were living in at the time. It was the middle of the day, probably around 2 p.m., and we were both completely sober. At one point, we were on the side of the road, on one of those lanes where people run and walk. Apologies, I don't know the proper name for those. And we saw a female child, around 12 years old if I had to guess, jogging. She was in our lane coming our way. I remember finding it strange for a child to be jogging on her own. There was no one else around, and it was a pretty remote area, like the countryside road. But I didn't mention anything to my boyfriend. We were walking side by side, so I walked behind him so she could pass. I stopped seeing her for a few seconds, and when I saw her again, next to me, she is a fully grown woman in her mid-40s. He immediately looks at me in shock and asks, "Did you see that?" I asked him did he also see a child turn into a woman, and he said yes. He said she never really left his sight, but as he blinked and looked again, she was no longer a child. We even looked back to confirm she was still a mid-40s woman. Since then, I've noticed other smaller glitches. I don't know if they were always there, or I just didn't pay attention, or if the whole thing started a chain of events.
This is really a tiny thing, but it was a bit spooky and I can't explain it. I was leaving for work in a rush a few days ago, and on my way out of the bedroom, I stepped on a 20p coin that was on the floor in the doorway. I thought that was really weird because my change stays in my purse in my bag, and I have no reason to take it out while at home. My partner doesn't even keep change in the house. He keeps it at work for the coffee machine. So I couldn't figure out why it would have ended up there. I just left it as I was rushing and forgot about it. When I came home that evening, a parcel had arrived. The instructions for assembling it recommended using a coin to turn a big screw. Since I was assembling it on the floor right beside the entrance to the bedroom, I remember thinking, what a cool coincidence that a 20p is lying right there where I need it. However, when I turned to get the coin, it wasn't there anymore. I hadn't put it away and my partner wasn't home yet, so I couldn't work out where it had gone. But again, I shrugged it off and went to get a 20p from my purse. I used the coin to turn the screw and put it down out of the way while I finished up. When I was done and was tidying up, I realized I had put the coin down in the same place as where I had stepped on the first coin. I can't help thinking maybe I somehow placed down the coin and it appeared in that spot briefly in the past. If not, it's a pretty weird coincidence. Around 2015-16, I was getting ready to go out with my mother and grandmother to go to Hobby Lobby. And for those of you who don't know what Hobby Lobby is, it's a store that is full of art, craft items, candles, etc. It's like a Walmart for crafts and art. Anyhow, after I was done getting ready, I sat in my room playing with my parakeet because I had some time to spare. A bit of time had passed, and my mother, whom I told to get me when she was ready to go, hadn't come to get me. I walked out into the living room, and she was flabbergasted at my appearance. Not because of the way I was dressed, but because I'd come out of my room. My mother claimed to have come into my room, and she said the lights were off. She checked all around for me and assumed I went to my grandma's. She lives right behind my mum's house. I told her I was in my room the entire time, and we both felt strange after that. Now, before this entire event, my mother was very liberal, as well as a few of my other family members. A bit of time passed, and when I woke up one day, everything changed. My grandma, who was strictly against tattoos and dyed hair, began doing so. She got a tattoo and dyed her hair pink. I was highly confused and brushed it off as a change of heart. That was until my mother became this kinda hardcore conservative overnight. It was all weird. My other grandmother, who didn't like tattoos either, got one. Everything that I grew up with just changed. Little by little, I've been noticing more differences in my family from what I had grown up with. I kept trying to make excuses for it, but nothing was fitting right. I'm still stuck here, in this universe that doesn't feel like my own. I don't know what to do, and I've read theories that once you hop, you can't go back to where you're from. And this isn't like a political issue. I'm not mad that my mother is conservative or whatever. It's just totally different from the mum I grew up with. Things have gotten weird. Some of my lifelong wishes have come true, but nothing feels right. Ever since I realized all of this, my brain has gotten strange. I suffer from bouts of disassociation, which, at first, I thought could have been seizures, except my soul feels like it's floating above my body. Nothing feels like it belongs to me anymore. My body feels foreign often. It feels as though my soul is trying to connect with a body that never belonged to it. I know I kinda sound crazy, but I'm saying this with 100% honesty from my side. I was going to try to make a video, but I don't want to upset my family or scare them by making them think I don't care about them. I try to make this new life work for me, but nothing is helping. Does anyone know what I can do to adjust? I have memories that nobody in my family remembers, and I tried going to doctors who say I should get a brain scan and tests, but I can't afford that right now. They say I'm coherent enough to pass the tests, but don't know why I'm having these episodes of disassociation or minor brain seizures. I really, highly believe that this isn't my world. Those close to me can vouch for me, and I can get screenshots of old texts I've sent stating what I'm stating here. If anyone has any sort of idea what this is, please, I'm willing to hear it all. All I know is that doctors are puzzled, I'm puzzled, and nobody besides my boyfriend and closest friends know about this. If you're listening to this, thanks. This was a small venting session about my situation, and I hope someone might have some answers. I, a 40-year-old female, went to the supermarket with my husband, 43, and son, 7, last week. As usual, he stayed in the car with son while I went in. They usually park at the parent and child parking spot, right by the main entrance. However, because it was cold and raining, they left me right by the door before parking. 15 minutes or so later, I came out and spotted our car right in front of me. I walked by the back window where I see my kid's car seat, but nobody in it. And then as I walk to the front, I see an old lady sitting in the front passenger seat alone. She was gazing towards the front of the car, and I thought, gosh, I almost opened the door of the wrong car. Lucky she's not looking this way, or I could have scared her by trying to get in. So I kept on walking for a couple of meters. It's a small parking lot, and couldn't see our car, so I called my husband. He answers the phone and I ask him where he's parked, and he says, right in front of the store, parent and child parking spot. I turn around and there he is, same car, and our child strapped into his seat. Neither of them saw me or the lady that I saw in the car. I'm still doing mental gymnastics to explain this to myself, unsuccessfully. Today I went to a big medical center that I have to get specialty care with. It takes me about 3 hours to drive there, so I always use the restroom after I arrive. Because of the virus that must not be named, the most direct route to the restroom is blocked off. People have to basically walk 3 sides of a square to get there. But it's big, clean and nice, so it's worth it. As I rounded the final side of the square to the restroom, another woman said something to me and I got held up in conversation. I watched a woman who had been walking in front of me walk into the alcove to the ladies' restroom. I watched her double check the sign, then walk into the restroom. I hoped it wouldn't be too crowded. I'm like a hermit crab of a human. I extricated myself from the stranger, walked to the restroom, and walked into an absolutely empty room. 3 stalls, no people, nothing. I opened the door back up and double check. Nope. Nowhere else to go. This woman straight up disappeared. I then had the most anxious pee of my life, washed my hands, and beat feet out of the weird bathroom that swallows people. I like Christmas. I like advent calendars, so I found a nice one online and placed an order for it. Beginning of December rolls around. Calendar hasn't come in the mail. So I look for the order in my email to check the tracking number. There's no email. The company has no record of me placing an order. My bank doesn't have any transactions relating to the order. My husband has no memory of me buying this either. He remembers I told him I wasn't going to be buying an advent calendar this year, which definitely not. I ordered it again, paid extra for rush shipping, and still don't have a record for the order, despite remembering getting an email confirmation. In fact, now, it doesn't even exist on the website. I've scoured all my records and pretty much I just need to accept I'm not going to have an advent calendar this year because it got lost in the matrix twice.
I'm not entirely sure if this is the right sub for this, but I can't really explain it by anything else. Ever since I was little, I would randomly hear this chiming sound. It's probably 3 notes, A, B, C, and DB, played in that order, and like a pedal was pressed. It's like a wind bell, a bottle being blown, or something similar, and it's a fairly high sound. I think it's a bit more long and has more notes, and I'm not sure if those are even the notes I keep hearing, but that's to give you an idea of what I'm trying to describe. It happens randomly. There can only be a few days to years in between, and it doesn't matter where I am, whether I have any electronics near or on, or who I'm with, what the weather is like, etc. I would consider it being some kind of brain fart or even an auditory hallucination if it wasn't for my current boyfriend, my parents, and maybe even some friends hearing it too. For all I know, it only happens if they're with me. It's been gnawing away at me ever since. I can't ever seem to pinpoint where it's coming from and why it happens. Has anyone here heard of something similar?
This glitch is very minor, but still freaked me out. I was 100% sober when it happened. So the other day I drew a nice hot bath for myself and plopped in a bath bomb. This bath bomb was heart-shaped, pink, and peach-scented. I kinda watched it fizz for a few seconds and then remembered to grab this little bath pillow I have from under the sink. So I grabbed the pillow and went to get into the bath, and the bath bomb is just not there. There's no evidence that it was ever there. I can't find it. The amount I did watch fizz was definitely enough where the whole bath could have diluted it to be unnoticeable, but where the hell did the rest of it go? I've had that type before, and it's definitely noticeable. Not to mention it takes literal minutes to dissolve, and my back was turned for maybe 10 seconds. I'm stumped and upset that I had to sit in a plain, warm bath. What? My wife and daughter had the same glitch experience at the grocery store earlier today. We were sitting there, eating, and she looks over at our son saying that he looks different today. Said that people change over time, but is it possible that someone can see the moment that a change happens? Then she kind of freaked out about a story she had to tell us. Wife and daughter were walking through a specific aisle looking for a thing. Realized it was in the next aisle. Turned the corner and started walking down the next one. But instead, restarted the aisle that they had just left from the beginning. Not like they turned around, but by a full circle. They noticed right away, so they turned around and checked the aisle they just left to confirm what happened, and it was a completely different aisle. She noticed a change in our son that I can't see after this weird glitch. Is it possible my wife just shifted realities? If so, what happened to my original wife? I want to share my story from my point of view. I was in the grocery store with my daughter doing some shopping. We were down the canned chili aisle. While walking by the chili to the left, I mentioned to my daughter that it was too bad that no one in the house liked chili dogs. She replied with, "Yuck, Mum, hot dogs are gross." I said, "Okay, well, we do need some canned corn." So I looked above the aisle to read the signs above the aisles, and noticed canned vegetables were in the next aisle to the right. So we walked, got to the end of the aisle and turned around. Before we turned the corner to the aisle on the right, I looked down and saw the chili to my left. I stopped and said to my daughter, "Hey, weren't we just down the chili aisle?" My daughter said, "Whoa, Mum, we were." Now we are standing outside the two aisles looking back and forth between both aisles. I looked to the one on the right, the one we were just down, and saw baking goods like flour and things. We both kind of tripped out a bit, laughing about it, chalking it up to we must be confused. I'm open-minded, but this definitely couldn't be possible. We wrapped up our shopping and came home. Fast forward to dinner time, minus a few details. The long story short is that I noticed my son's features looking slightly different to me. I kept saying how he just looked slightly older. Kind of like when you send your kid to camp for a week, and when you see them you notice how they aged just a wee bit from the last time you saw them. I asked my husband if he thought it was possible for a person to notice the moment of the slightest aging in a child. We are pretty open-minded in our house, and like to entertain conversations that don't fall in line with society's standards. It's fun and we like to think for ourselves. At some point, a while later, my daughter said, "Hey Mum, tell them what happened at the store." I told the story and my husband, being his lovable weird self, said, "I think you experienced a glitch in the matrix. Maybe my old wife is gone and that's why our son looks different." I laughed it off because I like to always see the rational side of things, and also thought he was mostly joking. So he posted about it. I have no idea what really happened at the store. Had my daughter not been there to experience it with me, I might actually believe I, in fact, do have a mental illness. I have a huge maple in my backyard, 10-foot trunk. Well, I remember when I moved in, and several times over the past years I've lived here looking at it, knowing it needed to come down. There was a big piece that was cut off and had leaves and water in it, obviously rotten. Last weekend I called someone out to look at it, since I have some money to pay for it. He comes out and looks at the tree and asks me why I want it down. I say the big ass hole it's filled with leaves and rotten on the side of it. He looks at me as if I'm crazy and says there is nothing wrong with the tree. He could use a trim, but that's it. Now I know for a fact this tree was in bad shape. Even my wife said it was bad and needed to come down. But here it is, now fully healed, and everything is good. So this happened a few years ago. I'm in college now. I still think back on it and laugh because of how weird the situation was. I got my license when I was a senior in high school, a lot later than my peers, because I had crazy anxiety and driving made it worse, and I hated showing up to school sweaty. Eventually I had to get it because I would stay later after school, and my mum didn't want to drive to pick up my sister and then me later in 2 separate trips. This particular day, I was driving to school alone for the first time because I stayed home from school until after lunch at about 2 p.m. because of doctor's appointments. It usually took me about 10 to 15 minutes from my house to school, depending on traffic. And on the way there were a couple of 4-way stop sign intersections and light intersections. When I pulled up to the first 4-way stop intersection, a car coming from the left stop sign passed in front of me. and the man driving the car was straight up brushing their teeth with a large white electric toothbrush. I thought this was hilarious looking, and I remembered it because I could tell I had the same toothbrush, even from how far away I was, just because it was so familiar to me. It was so funny at the time because I grew up watching Mr. Bean, and I remembered an episode where he brushed his teeth in the car. I continued to drive to school and came up to the final stoplight intersection where I had a red light. That's when I saw a man driving his car coming from the right through his green light, completely different person and different car. And he was brushing his teeth with a big white electric toothbrush. I remember shrieking in my car alone because I was so stunned that I saw two people within the span of 5 minutes, both brushing their teeth in their cars. When I finally pulled into the school parking lot, I parked in the back row where all of my friends would park. We were all usually late, so I ended up there, and I pulled my car into a spot right next to my best friend who was sitting in his car. And when I put my car in park and looked over at him, he was sitting there, brushing his teeth. Mind you, it wasn't an electric toothbrush, but still, I was sent into oblivion by seeing him there brushing his teeth when he should have been in class. I remember telling people about it for the rest of the day, there and after I got home, and no one really seemed to believe me or care that that had happened. But I think about it all the time, and it was such an odd time of day for it to be happening too, that it just always stuck with me. I'm so glad it happened to me, and thanks for letting me share.
This is something I think about from time to time, and it doesn't make sense. Years ago, my good friend and I went on a hiking trail. She wanted me to come with her because part of the trail led to a waterfall, river area, and it was a good day to go swimming. She had been there before to go swimming, and I had not. We started the trail, and near the beginning was a map. We looked at it to figure out which direction to go in and to get water. And then she took a picture on her phone for reference. I'm not the best at remembering directions. We walked and followed the trail and made all the correct turns. And at one point, we knew we should be near water. There should have been a waterfall. We should have heard it. There were just trees and a path that went on. We were confused, so we tried to take another route, and soon enough we ended up right back at the beginning part of the trail and saw the map again. We were suddenly right back at the parking lot. It felt like it took a much shorter time to reach the map again than it took us to get to the end where the water should be. We walked at least a mile from the map, and within minutes of turning around, we were just back where we started. We were both so bewildered, and we looked at each other and said, "What the fuck?" I asked her if we had just teleported. We laughed it off because there wasn't anything else to do. We never found the water that day. We just went back to the car and left. I have since been back to that trail and had no issues finding it. Looking back on this memory feels sort of dreamy, and I don't remember any fine details of our walk. Of course, it's possible that we went the wrong way, but it doesn't explain the time lapse and how it took us such a short amount of time to end up back at the beginning. I often wonder if something saved us from walking into the bad situation or something. I don't know. I'm wondering if anybody has had any similar experience or possible explanation.
I worked on Halloween this year and took advantage of being allowed to ditch my uniform and dress up. As part of my vampire getup, I wore a bunch of jewelry, namely a bunch of rings. Specifically, I had on knuckle rings that kept sliding off throughout the day. I'm usually in charge of cleaning bathrooms before I leave for the day. So was the case on Halloween. As I'm grabbing some nylon gloves, I considered taking my rings off, but decided not to, as the gloves were slightly too small and wouldn't allow my rings to move. Just before I put the gloves on, I dropped one of the knuckle rings and heard it hit the floor with a loud ting, ting, ting. I slipped it back on, checked my other rings and put my gloves on. I'm female, so I only go into the men's bathrooms to clean them. As I'm finishing up and sweeping the men's, I look down and there's one of my rings. The rings are cheapos from Walmart, so I was thinking maybe someone had dropped their own. But I look at my hand and my ring is gone. There's no way that ring could have gotten off my finger and out of the glove and hit the cement floor without making a sound. And I hadn't removed my gloves since I'd put them on. Just yesterday, I had another glitch, and it's been bothering me ever since. I work in the photo lab at my job, and with the Christmas rush, I've been super busy with orders of all kinds lately. A lot of sales have been going on, so similar orders pop up one after another. In this case, there was a special for free 8x10s. I believe it was either Thursday or Friday. I printed a slew of them and was labeling them to be sorted into boxes to await customer pickup when I noticed I had 2 orders by the same person. A common theme with these types of specials. We'll say the name was Biggers. It was a very distinct name, hence why I remember printing it so well. I remember thinking, damn, I didn't realize there were 2 for her. I could have just put them in the same envelope. While I'd also gotten confused for a moment before, wondering why I had 2 pictures by the same person but couldn't find the label. So I found the label, packed them up and put them away. Amongst the other orders, I remember printing 2 orders of people with the same last name. We'll call them Loud L and Loud A. Loud both had orders and I remembered them because they matched, and I see their names a lot while working. I packed them up and put them away. So yesterday, I'm at work and Miss Biggers comes in for her orders. I have 2, she says. I reply, yes ma'am, I remember printing them. But when I look in the boxes under the letter B, I only see 1 print. She tells me again, I know I had 2. I believe her and reiterate that I remember printing 2 for the reasons above. I go check the printer and search the history. Only 1 order comes up, the one I found. I go to the computer and search customer history. These never get cleared, so there are orders from a decade ago listed on there. And even if an order is cancelled, they aren't deleted, only labelled as cancelled. But there's still only 1 order on there. Unable to figure out what happened to the other order, I tell her to just resubmit it, and I'll honour the sale, and I figure it's just a fluke. Until Mr. Loud comes in. I have 1 for L and 1 for A. Yes, I remember them. Except I only find L's photo, not A's. He insists that there are 2 orders, and I know he's right. Like before, I check the printer, I check the computer history. Absolutely nothing. These orders apparently never existed. I tell him this just happened earlier and play it off as a system error. I tell him to resend them and we'll honour the free price. When the manager, who was present while I was working on the orders originally, comes in, I ask her if she remembers those names and how I printed multiple ones. She says yes. I tell her they apparently never existed and aren't anywhere in the system. She's as dumbfounded as I am. I've experienced weird things in the past that I joked were glitches in the Matrix, but this is crazier than anything I've experienced and baffles me. I could explain the ring glitch away, but I cannot explain this one away. I regret not asking for order proof from the customers, like emails or order numbers, to see if there were any residual leftovers. I think I might have seen into another timeline for a second. Here's what happened. I had a playdate set up for my son's friend to come over to our place. My son was feeling a bit nervous about it that morning and wasn't really in the mood for his friend to come over. So he kept saying to cancel it, and he put it into the universe that they wouldn't come. He said that a few times. I didn't want to cancel it because I don't like cancelling things on others last minute. So I just left it. My son eventually got over these feelings and was looking forward to his friend coming. So the time comes where he's supposed to be dropped off, and they're not showing up. At first I thought they were just late, so we waited and waited. I kept looking out the window to see if they were there yet. Finally, when I look outside again, I see a burgundy car on the other side of my black car in the driveway. I say, "They're here." So we go to the front door and wait a minute for a knock or a doorbell. Nothing happens. I'm like, So I open the door and look out. No one there. No car there. At this point, I'm so confused. I swear I saw a car there. So I thought maybe they showed up but just left for some reason. I texted her to see if they were still coming, but no response. I thought it was weird that the mum wouldn't text me to say they were late or couldn't make it after all. So we just assume they're not coming and get on with our day. Finally, hours later, I get a text from her saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I totally forgot about it." Which is fine, it happens. Just the weird part is that I saw a car there right around the time they would have showed up, if they did come. So I thought maybe when my son was hoping and praying that they wouldn't come that morning, it switched the timelines to where they forgot. But I briefly saw into the timeline where they did show up. Weird to think about. So this just happened about 3 days ago. My girlfriend and I, 27 male, live together and we have 2 dogs. We have a sliding glass door that goes out to a small enclosed porch area, and this is where we keep our dogs' food and water bowls. My girlfriend fed the dogs and closed the door, like she always does. One of our dogs is a spaz and won't eat unless we literally close the door and keep him out there. So she comes back in and sits on the couch, which is in the room by the sliding glass door. I'm sitting on a chair closest to the door where the handle to the door is directly to my left, and if I were to lean over far enough in the chair, I could probably open it. So this is where things got weird. After about 5 to 10 minutes, there was an abrupt noise, which was our dog basically wrecking through the blinds on the door and running back into the house. We have those tall vertical hanging white blinds that hang from the top all the way down to the floor. It startled me at first because of how sudden it was, and since it was totally right next to me. I didn't think a whole lot about it until I looked back outside where my other dog was still eating and the sliding glass door was still closed. What's even weirder is we had the blinds pulled open a decent amount so that when you open the sliding door to go outside, the blinds aren't in the way. So it's not even like he came in where the normal entrance of the door would be. It's like he phased through the middle of the door because that's where the blinds were pulled to, and that's how we noticed him coming in because the blinds were rocking back and forth. Also, in order to come back inside where he did, the door would have had to have been pulled all the way open. It was completely shut. I looked at my girlfriend and said, "The door is still closed. How did he get back in?" That's when she noticed too, and her eyes got big and we were both just like, what the hell, for a good 30 minutes. I can't seem to come up with any explanation. The door was completely closed, and even if it was cracked, which it wasn't, how would it have closed behind him, or explain the point of entrance he made, which was in the middle of the door? There was also no damage or dents or anything to the glass door. Long story short, my wife passed away in 2011 from multiple forms of cancer. Towards the end of her battle, we were staying at an extended stay type of hotel near the hospital. It made it easy for us to get her chemo and radiation without having to travel long distances. When we were walking down the hallway at this hotel, which many others had likely stayed at due to medical issues, we turned the corner. There were two young boys, both in swim-type clothing with a towel over their shoulder, probably 8 to 9 years old. They were about 50 feet in front of us. They approached the elevator and went inside. The doors closed and we figured we would wait for the next one. We walked up and pressed the button on the door, and it immediately popped open, with no one inside. There was no way it had any time to travel anywhere and return that quickly. We looked at each other in shock and couldn't fathom how this happened or where the boys went. It's bothered me to this day. To start off with an important note, I have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and it really affects my day-to-day decisions. I try to follow through on my appointments, but sometimes it's not always possible if I have a bad reaction. So I had a haircut planned out, but that day I felt pretty shitty. I was considering turning around and going back home. I finally decided I'll just do my best and go get the appointment done. Fast forward to me sitting in the chair, getting the haircut, when my barber gets a phone call. He picks up, and a few moments later is looking at me oddly. He said okay, no problem, and hung up. He walked up to me and was like, "You're digital abuse, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." Apparently, I just called him and said I'll be there a few minutes later, due to stomach issues. We both stared at the door, but no one ever came. Still the weirdest moment. My story happens back in August of this year. I have started a new job back in July and was settling in with my new responsibilities and co-workers. My partner had picked me up from work and we headed back to the house, but I stopped at the gas station along the way. I remember that it was raining that afternoon, all the way into the evening. Before I got out of the car, I made sure that I had my wallet on me and checked the contents of it. A $20 bill, a $10 bill, and a bunch of ones behind it. I can be a bit OCD when it comes to small things, especially when I have money in my wallet. I always organize my bills according to the monetary value, greatest to smallest. Reverse mathematical order, if you will. I also tend to check my wallets frequently to make sure nothing is missing. I walked into the gas station with my partner and we got everything that we had come in for and rang up our transactions separately. I vividly remember my total coming to $9.96, so I reached into my wallet and pulled out the $10 bill and placed it on the counter. As the cashier was bagging my things up, I looked down at the snack displays just below the counter to see if there was anything else I wanted to purchase to satisfy my late night sweet tooth. I looked up at the counter again and laying there was a $1 bill. Confused and thinking that I wasn't paying close enough attention and grabbed the wrong bill, I pulled my wallet out again and grabbed the proper change. That's when an audible "what the fuck" passed my lips. In my wallet, just behind the $20 bills, were a bunch of ones, just as they were before I got into the store. There was no $10 bill in my wallet. It's like it literally vanished into thin air. I began to check all my pockets that I had on me, but alas, there was no $10 bill anywhere on my person or in my possession. I'm not afraid to say that I indulge in the recreational use of marijuana, and I have a pretty high tolerance. I smoked a blunt before work as I normally do, and an hour or two into my 9-hour shift, the high wore off, and I was completely sober. So there is no way in hell that I imagined or hallucinated any of this. Nor do I have any history of doing the aforementioned. I know exactly how much money I had in my wallet, and I didn't spend any money that day either. My $10 bill had either disappeared or literally transformed into a $1 bill when I wasn't looking. Still confused, I paid with my $20 bill, got my change and left. But I was left seriously frazzled the rest of the evening. This definitely isn't one of the scariest entries, but I didn't know how odd it was until I actually started to write this out, and to be honest, I have goosebumps just thinking about it all over again. I still have so many questions. Where did my $10 bill go? How could a $10 bill be in someone's wallet all day and then just disappear as soon as you're about to pay for something for the first time that day? Did it actually transform into a $1 bill when I wasn't looking? It's amazing how something so small can just boggle your mind completely and make you question life, even more than you already do. So last year I was working a customer service role at an insurance company, over the phone work. We got a 20-minute morning break, 30-minute lunch, and a 20-minute afternoon break. During my lunch break one day, I went to sit in my car out in the car park and eat my food, to make it easier to have a smoke before going back inside. Plus, then I could listen to music while I eat. Basically, I'm a car enthusiast, and I tend to notice cars and their registration plate in passing. My eyes just sort of automatically go to cars and their plates, and take them in by way of habit. I was walking towards the smoking area, and I noticed a red Vauxhall Astra 2013 model up ahead, slowly starting to reverse out of a parking space. I got to the smokers area just behind the wall next to the Astra, which was reversing. I lit up my cigarette and turned around again to face the car, I guess to judge their driving skills. And instead of being a red Astra, it was now a red Audi A1 with the exact same registration plate, backing out of the parking space where the Astra had been not even 5 seconds ago. I watched it drive out of the car park and onto the road in complete shock. I thought about it constantly for the next week, and it started to make me feel sick and question everything in life the more I thought about it. Not really had anything else weird like this happen to me before, and I hope it doesn't cause more. It really freaked me out. I'm a police officer who works for a small town. For context, I'm also married with one child. One afternoon I woke up around 4:50 p.m. to get ready for the night shift. As I was getting ready, I had this strange feeling that something wasn't right. It didn't seem to bother me too much, and I assumed that I was just still hazy from waking up. I finished getting ready and went out to my car to leave for work. I got about a mile or two from my house, and the strange feeling returned. This time, I had a voice in my head telling me to go back home and call out. Being that I work for a small agency, I didn't have the luxury of calling out due to us being short-staffed. I continued on my way to work, which is about a 15 to 20 minute drive. As I got closer to town, I began having extreme anxiety to the point where my stomach felt like it was in knots. I got to work and met up with my sergeant. Me, knowing that my sergeant was going to leave around 12 a.m. and I would be by myself, I decided to tell him what I was feeling. He shrugged it off and just told me to watch my back. As the night drew on, my anxiety seemed to come and go. It definitely helped talking to my sergeant about it. But as we were in the patrol car talking, I heard a burglary call come out in the county for the same road I live on. Dispatch advised that they were on the phone with a female subject and she was hiding in the bathroom with a gun along with her daughter. I immediately opened the computer and realized it was my address. I frantically called my wife multiple times and couldn't get in touch with her. I began driving as fast as I could to get home. Thankfully, the deputies got there before I could, and everything seemed to be okay. I eventually got to the house and spoke with my wife about it. She stated that the house alarm went off while she was giving my daughter a bath. But what was strange was that the alarm was for a window break. I honestly didn't even know we had alarms for the windows, and I've never had any alarms for those go off before. It wasn't windy or raining outside either. Part of me wonders if someone may have tried to break in but freaked out when they heard the alarm. Either way, after that occurred, I returned to work and felt much better. It was my 18th birthday. Me and about 15 friends of mine had all just come back to my apartment building from a birthday dinner they had for me at TGI Fridays. The apartment building I grew up in is this tall building with only 2 elevators and 2 staircases. I lived on the 11th floor. Sometimes me and my friends or family my age would race elevators for fun as kids if we happened to have both elevators arrive at our floor at the same time. This was the case that night. Both elevators got to the lobby at the same time. Me and my friends packed into both elevators and hit the door close buttons at the same time. I heard the usual tone of the doors closing on both elevators, and they both closed within a split second of each other. There were about 7 or 8 of us packed into each elevator, but I was the only one in my elevator that lived in the building and knew the ins and outs of racing elevators for fun. I knew that both elevators were equal in speed and were fairly quick, and took maybe 10 seconds to get from the ground floor to my floor. There was not a chance in hell that anyone could scale the 11 flights of stairs quicker than that. I also knew that when both elevators were traveling in the same direction, me and my friends would be able to yell to each other through the elevator shaft and talk to each other in transit, as long as the elevators left at the same time and went in the same direction, which they did. So me and my rowdy teenage friends were all laughing and shouting to each other from elevator to elevator, and we could hear each other too. But about halfway up, the other elevator sounded more drowned out, like speaking into a fan. And then we stopped hearing them altogether. The way my old apartment building was designed, the elevators are in the very center of each floor, and each floor is just a long, single, rectangular hallway. My apartment was at the far corner of the building, as far as can be away from the staircases and elevators. When my elevator opened with my friends in it, I was ready to make a mad dash towards my apartment door, hopefully just beating out the other elevator door as it should have been opening, with just enough time for me and my friends in my elevator to get a head start and win the race to my apartment. Instead, we all flew out of our elevator to see no one else coming out of the other elevator. We didn't hear it open. We didn't hear several loud teenagers jump out like I had expected. It was as if the other elevator wasn't even used at the same time as we used ours, and our friends were nowhere to be found. I knew the timing of these elevators perfectly. I had grown up in this building since I was a toddler, and had taken these up and down and raced friends and neighbors with them my whole life. I found it really odd that the elevators didn't open up at the same time. I also thought that maybe the other one just stopped on another floor between the lobby and the 11th floor, which of course was a common thing to have happened, and would have been good news, since that would have meant we definitely won the elevator race. My elevator went as fast as it possibly could have gone, going straight from the lobby to the 11th floor. We all made our way down the hallway and into my apartment, and found that my family and neighbors had decorated the apartment with pictures of my friends and I, and surprised me with a cake. The strange part is that this whole surprise ensemble included all of my friends who were in the other elevator that went MIA. It was winter, and they all already had their jackets off and had thrown them onto my bed in my bedroom, and all looked as if they had already been hanging out inside the apartment for at least a few minutes. It made absolutely no sense. Both elevators left the lobby at the same time, and should have taken the exact same 10 seconds or so to reach my floor. But somehow, they had clearly got to my apartment minutes ago. I asked my friend in the other elevator how they got there so fast, and I just got a confused reaction from everyone, including my friends that were in my elevator too. I was the only one who was left scratching my head as to how everyone inside the other elevator seemed to teleport straight into my apartment somehow. Super weird. I just shrugged off the experience as best as I could at the moment, although it still has me wondering to this day how that happened. I'm a long-time reader of Glitch in the Matrix, and this memory always comes to mind when I start reading the latest posts. Let me know what you think, and thank you so much for listening. This has bothered me since it happened, and it's so weird and makes no sense whatsoever. I was outside petting my cat. I was the only person out there. I didn't leave my porch steps at any time, and nobody came out there. My hands were empty, besides a cigarette I was smoking. Nothing was at the bottom of the steps. I go inside for less than 5 seconds to grab a cat brush and go back out. Nobody went out there in that time before I went back out there. I open the door, and there are 2 socks on the concrete next to the first step. A black one of my son's, and a white one of mine. I just stood there, at the top step, confused. My husband tried to convince me these socks were stuck to me somehow, and just fell off and landed there. I think I'd know if I had laundry just hanging off me. And they were wadded up. Both of them. My sock was clean at least, but in a bowl. Maybe the sock thief in my washer or dryer decided to give me them back? So in order to tell the whole story, which happened in 2020 when I was 18, I have to go back to when I was in middle school and mowed my neighbor's lawn for money. So I guess this started when I was in middle school. My dad talked to me about how I could start making money helping out neighbors. My neighbors were old and couldn't mow their own lawns, but didn't want to pay a company to do it for them. So they asked me. I started doing this for a couple of years before I was old enough to start doing real jobs. But during the time I'd mow their lawns, I had just gotten my first pair of headphones. I listened to music all day, wherever I was, so by instinct, I wore them while mowing the lawn. It was the early 2010s, so I listened to stuff like AWOL Nation, foster the people, etc. Fast forward to one of the last mows in September. I was listening to something by AWOL Nation as a girl and her family walked down the street. Before I notice her, I start to empty out the mower's bag and dump it into the woods across the street. I was really shy, so I'm sure I acted like I didn't see them, but she stops me anyway and asks what I was listening to. She just moved to my town and wanted to make friends, I assume. I probably just said AWOL Nation. I remember she said she liked Sail. End of the conversation for the most part, and without realizing it, I don't see her again until sophomore year of high school. So fast forward to June 15th, 2018, my sophomore year of high school. My still favorite band, AWOL Nation, is coming to Clifton Park, New York to play live. So I invite my friends and my dad to go with me. I wanted to be up front by the railing, so we got there hours before it started. We pull into the parking lot and see that there's maybe 2 more groups in line ahead of us already. As we walk towards the line, my dad sees one of our old neighbors, and it turns out it's the girl, her friends she invited, and her family I met while mowing the lawn. I introduced myself to everyone like it was my first time meeting them, but they say they remember me as the lawn mowing kid. So the concert starts and we walk in, and my friends and hers just end up sticking together since we were the youngest there probably. My parents stayed at the bar for drinks. Me and her talk for a bit between bands, and after the concert ends she asks for my number. Skip forward again. So at this point, me and my girlfriend have been dating from summer 2018 to January 2020. We've both bonded over our love for music and architecture. In February 2019, we take a train to go to Manhattan for winter break and have the best time of our lives there. The next year, we still live in Albany, New York, and wanted to go back to New York City for winter break and my birthday. Our now favorite artist, Tame Impala, has a set release date for his new album, The Slow Rush, which happens to be the same time we go to NYC. So we decide to wait and listen to it for the first time on the train ride down. As I'm packing, I find the old headphones I used to wear mowing the lawn in a box with my Xbox and stuff. They're actually pretty good, so I decided to bring them on the train instead of my AirPods. So now we're at the train station, wanting to get on as my girlfriend notices the headphones and kind of gasps and smiles, asking if those are my old goofy pair. Since it's early in the morning, she decided she wanted to sleep on the train ride this time and let me listen to the new album first, since it would have been awkward if both of us were listening with different headphones, instead of like a speaker or something. So I agree and give her my neck pillow thing, and I start listening after I see she's asleep, so she doesn't accidentally hear the music somehow. I start listening to AWOL Nation with my old headphones, instead of the new album, for old time's sake. After a couple of songs, I'm now in a good mood and finally put on the new album. The album opens up with the song One More Year. It immediately gave me this weird feeling, but I didn't really think much of it until now. I just kept listening. It starts off with this voice saying 1 more year. As a music enjoyer, I like the sound, but nonetheless, I still got creepy and sad vibes from it. As the lyrics start to come in, it word by word describes her and I's relationship. I start crying immediately in my seat, but thankfully, she's asleep still. When I say word for word, I mean it sounded like I was listening to myself, singing to Kate, saying our relationship is going to end in 1 year. The lyrics also kind of predict how COVID will keep us doing the same stuff and getting bored of each other, which was kind of what happened. I could keep going on about how weird I feel from it. But fast forward to February 2021, and I get a call from her saying she thinks she wants to break up. 1 year and 2 days after the train ride, I listened to the song 1 More Year. We broke up. Not once during that time, other than the first time I heard the song, did I think it was a prediction or message. Nor did I ever tell her. But now I can't hear the song without thinking of some form of a message. When I was a teenager, I worked as a lifeguard in a water park. We had 5 water slides that started from this one tower and ended at a single pool that was line of sight. But with the layout of the park, it was a few minute walk from the slide pool to the top of the slides again. One lifeguard sat at the top of the tower, and another would be at the pool at the bottom. So we would signal to each other if someone was messing around on the way down, or if we needed to pause the line for any reason. With the layout of the park, you could not just see the slide pool, but see the entire park from the top of the slide tower. You could even see someone as they walked the entire few minute path from the slide pool up to the slide tower again. The last 2 hours of the day were always really slow on the slides, so I would frequently skip my breaks to sit on top and twiddle my thumbs for the remainder of my shift. Anyways, it's about 30 minutes before closing and I'm doing my thing, chilling on the top of the slides. Only 2 kids, a boy and a girl, were going down the slides and coming back up, since there was no line at this point. As I said, it was a long walk, so the boy would come up and go. Then, about 2 minutes later, the girl would come up and go. 2 minutes later, the boy again, etc. Well, the boy comes back up, and he goes down slide 2. Slide 2 is completely enclosed, very fast, under 20-second ride, and has about a 24-inch diameter. I'm bored, so I lean over the rails, watching the bottom, and never see the boy come out of the slide. A minute later, the girl comes up, and she says she wants to go down slide 2. I tell her to wait a minute, and have her wait while I watch for the boy to come out. He never does. After a solid 2 minutes from me sending him down, keep in mind it's a fully enclosed 20-second ride, I radio the guard at the bottom and ask if the boy came out. The guard says he never did. Then I scan over the entire park. There's maybe 20 people in the park at this time of day, and I don't see the boy anywhere. At this point, I'm getting confused, but I chalk it up to the boy coming down, jumping out the side of the pool and going to the nearby bathroom. After finally concluding I must be crazy, I send the girl down slide 2. Sure enough, 20 seconds later, the girl comes out of the slide and runs off, no issue. A few minutes later, the girl comes back up, goes down slide 2 again and comes right back out 20 seconds later. So I go back to waiting for the next person to come up the slide tower, when all of a sudden, the boy comes out of the bottom of slide 2. It had been at least 10 minutes since I'd sent him down, and the girl had gone through that slide as normal 2 times in those 10 minutes. To this day, I can't figure out what happened. Like I said, slide 2 is fast, narrow, and fully enclosed. There's no way to stop yourself on the way down. Trust me, I've tried. And even if he did manage to stop himself, there is no way that girl could have passed by him at all, let alone unimpeded in the normal 20 seconds. This boy just disappeared off the face of the earth for 10 minutes and respawned in the middle of slide 2 like nothing happened. I've gone over it in my head many times and to this day have no clue what happened to that boy for 10 minutes.
This actually only happened a few hours ago. I've yet to talk about it to my roommates, because they'll just think I'm crazy. But anyways, this is what happened. My roommates leave for work at around 7:30 a.m., and I work from home due to my job taking extra precautions for COVID, and I always finish work before them at 6:20 p.m. They get back at about 6:50 p.m. I just finished a long day of work and decided to play a few games as stress relief, due to me almost getting fired yesterday. I'm just sitting on my bed when I hear the front door open, clear as day. Keep in mind, my room is right next to the front door. I then got up greeting what I thought was one of my roommates and leaving my room to see if his day was stressful and if he needed anything. But when I got into the living room, no one was there. His keys nor his jacket were there. I then looked outside and saw that no car was in our parking space. Obviously, like anyone would, I began to freak out thinking, is someone in my house? Where are they? I ran back to my room and grabbed my baseball bat and began to search the house. After a full sweep of the house and entering the last room, which was a closet, I thought maybe I was hearing things. So I went back to the living room, and the roommate I thought entered earlier was on the couch, chilling, like he has been there for a while. I looked outside and saw his car. I didn't hear the door open or a car pulling up once during the sweep, but what my roommate told me didn't help me at all. He got up saying something about him checking on me and seeing what he thought was me sleeping in my bed. I went to check it out and nothing. He thinks it was just a long day of work taking a toll on him. And maybe it's the same for me, but can't hurt to see if anyone has an explanation for this.
I never thought I'd find a place where I could talk about what happened to my sister and I at the beach, until I found this subreddit. This happened about 15 years ago. We were on our annual family holiday and my sister and I decided to go for a walk on the Norfolk, UK beach we were near. Our dog Bella, a bichon frisé, loved going for walks, but today she completely refused and would not budge. We just thought it was funny how stubborn she was being and just went without her. About 30 minutes into our walk, I told my sister to watch out as there was horse poo in our way. Up ahead, we could see a woman with blonde hair on a brown horse, and we both commented on her. As she got closer, she was not on a horse, nor were there any horses around. That was quite weird to us, and we were both sure she was on a horse. Something felt very odd, but we carried on walking. Another 20 minutes in, and we were suddenly surrounded by hundreds of dead crabs. It seemed odd, but we also discussed that being a beach, it wasn't that out of the ordinary to see dead crabs. Just not usually that many. We stopped for a bit, just to enjoy the sound of the sea coming in and out. I got this sudden rush of fear over me, looked to the horizon and saw what looked like a torpedo going across the sea line at a steady pace. I started to tap my sister to get her attention, to show her what I could see. She could see it too, and started to freak out. We genuinely thought the beach was about to be bombed. As the torpedo got to one end of the horizon, it turned around and started to come back. This time, as it started to come back past, it looked like it was opening up and inflating. I checked with my sister, and she too could see everything I saw. The torpedo opened up into what looked like a boat, or what a smaller Noah's Ark would look like. The boat was clearly bright green and yellow, but I felt like we should not have been able to see the colors so clearly with the boat being so far away. The weirdest part was that we could see a man on the boat, much bigger than the boat, waving slowly and smiling as he went past. We keep looking at all the people around us and no one else was looking. Once the boat got to the end of the horizon, it turned back into a torpedo, went to the other end, then disappeared. When we got back, my mum was really worried as we had gone for ages, and she said both our phones went straight to voicemail, even though they were both turned on with full battery. We were both in disbelief about what we had seen, and I've tried to research it and cannot find anything that remotely touches the subject. If anyone has any ideas, please shout them out. I was singing in the shower the other day, and I stopped for a split moment to bend down to get some shampoo. As I went to do this, I heard myself singing. My mouth never opened. I don't have schizophrenia or anything that would make a noise like that. It was the same song, my voice, but I wasn't singing. And when I went to open my mouth to ask if someone was there, the singing stopped. I also wasn't listening to any music, so it couldn't have been any other voices. I sing a cappella in the shower. I asked my roommates if they were playing music or singing in their shower on the opposite side of the wall, and they said they were all in the living room, playing a board game. The voice was clear, as if it were coming from my own mouth. The shower that I shower in has pretty harsh water pressure, so it's crazy loud. I can't think of how this could have happened, and it's been plaguing my mind a lot. I don't drink often, and I wasn't under the influence when this happened. I've never done drugs. I'm terrified and unsure as to what happened. I have no logical explanation for it. I am flawed. Nothing like this has ever happened before.
I usually arrive at work quite early in the day, often in the very early hours of the morning, 3, 4, maybe 5 a.m. My office is within a skyscraper that also houses a shopping mall and a high-end apartment block. I usually make a habit of parking near the apartment block's area to avoid getting my car scratched by shoppers once the mall opens. However, yesterday something felt wrong. Nothing was in the garage. I made my way all the way into the garage before I realized that there was nothing there. No cars. No people. No snaking system of vents and wires hanging from the ceiling. It was just me. Silence. And almost nothing else. I panicked and did a 180 to make my way out. But on my way back out, I was stopped by a security guard who asked where I was going in such a hurry. I almost told him what was going on, but then I looked around me, and everything is normal again. The parking lot went from empty to nearly packed, and everything looks normal, though some cars do appear oddly parked and slightly weird looking, but things are nevertheless normal for the rest of the day. I'm just a bit shook and confused right now. I saw something like this before, and I was able to convince myself that it's just prolonged stress. But now, it's back, and I question reality more than just a bit.
So a couple of years ago, I was out having a beer with a couple of my friends on a terrace. It was a cloudy, drizzly day, and we were all talking about our childhood days. It was a good day. I got up to go to the table with the icebox to get another beer, when suddenly everything blacked out. Next thing I saw, I was suddenly at a train station, which looked from the 1800s. I don't even know if trains existed then, but based on the architecture of the station and people's clothing, it felt around the time period. I was standing under a giant clock, trying to make of what this place was and what had just happened suddenly, when I realized I had a ticket in my hand which said first-class reservation from Brussels to Mechelen. At this point, I would like to clarify I'm from India, and back then I still hadn't traveled to Europe, so at that moment I was still very confused as to where I was and why I had that ticket in my hand. When I realized I had a ticket in my hand which said first-class reservation from Brussels to Mechelen, I felt a sense of urgency as the train was ready to leave and the clock under which I was had struck 2:15 p.m. and the departure time had already passed. But the train was still at the platform blowing its old steam horn. The engine looked brand new, but it was a steam engine like the olden days. I was completely baffled by what was happening, and at this point, I saw a man staring directly at me. He was wearing a penguin suit and wore a tall hat.
and had a huge mustache. His look was more of one wherein I felt he knew something. Something like I wasn't supposed to be there. Just that moment, everything snapped back and I remember lying down on my terrace with both my friends standing over me terrified. I was back at my terrace. I asked them what had happened and they told me what they saw. They said while I was walking towards the table with the icebox, I froze stiff and fell to the ground as if a statue. I was out for hardly 2 to 3 seconds. They saw me falling and came running calling out my name, and I just came back to my senses. The feeling was very weird because they said I was out for hardly 2-3 seconds, but what I remembered from my experience at the station, I was there for at least 10-15 minutes, closely watching everything and everyone around me. To this day, I believe I somehow slipped into another reality, and that man who looked at me, the face of whom I still remember very clearly, I'll never forget. That man somehow realized my slippage into another time period, and somehow sent me back. Let me know what you think about this. I would love to know your thoughts.
This happened to me about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, and to this day I still can't quite say what happened. I was in my room. I was browsing the internet while I had a head of garlic roasting in the toaster in the kitchen. Then I heard my dad come inside, so I figured I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone and say hi to my dad while I went to check on my garlic. I walked out of my room and caught my dad halfway down the hall. I said hi and something along the lines of, "Gotta go check on my garlic." My dad simply replied with a quick
Hi.
and walked straight into his room. I didn't think much of it and just figured he had a long day at work. It should be noted that our hallway is narrow and my dad is much bigger than me, so as I passed my dad in the hallway, I had to press myself against the wall to squeeze past him. While I was in the kitchen, I heard the front door open. My dad's car started and he left, which I thought was super odd since he hadn't been home for but a few minutes at this point. Again, I brushed it off and went back to my room. About 5 minutes later, the front door opened again and it was my dad, except this time, he was loud and energetic. He came in and immediately hollered out,
Is someone cooking? Something smells good.
I came out of my room and said, "Yeah, it's the garlic, remember?" That's when he asked me what I meant, when I said, "Doesn't he remember?" And I explained to him that he had just been home and told him about the garlic when I passed him in the hallway. That I had just saw him a few minutes ago, and that he had walked straight into his room. His demeanor immediately changed and he said,
What do you mean? I just got off the highway and pulled into the driveway right now. Are you telling me someone went into my room?
I told him I saw him go into his room. At this point, he was dead serious and went to his room to check for any missing items. At this point, he was under the belief that a home invader had come in and rummaged around his house. Once he was calm, I explained to him exactly what had happened, and even explained that the person I saw was even wearing the exact outfit my dad was when he walked into the house. My dad was about as spooked as I was. To this day, I still have no idea what happened there. At one point, we thought that maybe my dad had an absence spell or something, since he's had times before when he was driving where he forgets chunks of time. Although we couldn't explain then why he came in and then immediately left again, or how it was that my dad clearly remembered just coming off the highway before getting into the house, or where he could have gone in the few brief minutes between when he first left and when he arrived again. To this day, the one part that still really creeps me out is just how close I had been to my father when I slipped past him in the hallway. If anyone has any ideas of what might have happened that night, I'm all ears.
So my birthday was a few months ago, and I recently set up a small business. So my best friend, Anna, gifted me a pen with my business name and logo printed on it. It's pretty cute, and I really liked the thought of using a personalized pen when I was organizing appointments and etc. I tested the pen on the back of my hand, and unfortunately, it was blue ink. I hate blue ink. It hurts my eyes when I write more than a couple of lines, and just prefer the look of black ink in general. I showed Anna the ink on the back of my hand. She also prefers black ink and was disappointed it was blue because she wasn't able to specify what color ink when ordering, and had been hoping black would be default. Anyways, I had the pen for a good while and never used it until this week. I met Anna and we were in her car when a client called to make an appointment. Blue pen was the only pen I had on hand, so I reluctantly used it to write down the details of the client and appointment and all the usual stuff. When I had finished with the call, I silently showed Anna what I had written. The ink was now black. Neither of us can explain or understand this. She and I both remember the blue ink that is now black ink. This happened last Saturday, Sunday. On Saturday, we took a short local trip with my family who visited me as I live in another city. After they left, I got home around 6 p.m. and was watching YouTube and whatnot. For some reason, I got an urge to call my grandpa. However, I had to get ready for a night out with my friends. We were meeting at 8 p.m. and so I thought I'd call him the next day. This was literally the first time I got this urge since we don't really talk that often. Anyway, the next day on Sunday at 4:10 p.m, my grandpa called me asking if I called him yesterday, as he got a missed call. I told him I didn't, but I did think of calling him. I asked when he received the missed call, and he said around 7 p.m. I was doing my makeup and stuff by then. However, I'm sure I didn't call him, and there's no such log on my phone. The last time we talked was July 12th, 2020, according to my call log. Interestingly, the urge I had was to call my grandpa, although he and my grandma share the same phone, and he was the one who called me instead of my grandma. Has anyone experienced something like this? Maybe you have an explanation for this. I found this extremely bizarre, yet I'm glad my grandpa called me about the supposed missed call since I forgot to call him the next day. About 4 years ago, I had a very weird experience that has stuck with me ever since. I was driving home from work and it was about 4 a.m. It was pretty much just me on the road at that hour. I've driven this exact route many times and have never seen a deer, especially since this particular stretch of the freeway was far away from the mountains, where most of the deer tend to reside. But as I'm driving along, I feel like things slow down, and then all of a sudden, I see a part of the road that I'm not actually going to reach for a couple of minutes. I see a doe walk out of some trees on the right side of the road, look my direction, and then slowly walk to the left side and disappear off into some shrubs. In an instant, the view in front of me changed back to where I physically am on the road. As I approached the place I just had this vision of, I decided to slow down since I was going about 70 miles per hour, and figured if a deer is truly going to cross, I should prepare. And sure enough, I get to that particular stretch of road. The deer walks out of the trees, looks at me, and wanders off to the shrubs on the left. Exactly how I saw it a couple of minutes before. If I hadn't slowed down, I would have had very little to no time to react, and probably would have hit that deer.
This experience is still unreal to me, no matter how hard I question it. So, I'm a grade 12 student coming to an end of my school days, and I usually tend to read during my bus rides till one day I stopped. I woke up one morning and got ready for school. I grabbed my backpack and my lunch and took off towards the bus stop. It was only a 5-minute walk from my home, so I wasn't worried too much about missing the bus. I had started reading a book I grabbed from my school's library for a book report. However, the book seemed to change with every page I flipped. When my bus arrived, I hopped on and was off to school. I put my book away so I could see where I was going, but something was different about the seats. You see, usually the bus is packed full with kids of all ages, but today it was empty. Thinking nothing of it, I took my usual spot at the back of the bus and pulled out my book and flipped to the page I was reading. Now here's where it gets interesting. I read a paragraph, but what I was reading wasn't what was written there before. It was talking about the book's character getting onto the bus and finding empty seats before taking theirs at the back. At this point I was confused, because the same thing the book stated was the same thing that happened to me. I kept reading until the bus came to a stop and the doors opened to let another student on. I looked up to see a student taking a seat at the very front. I went back to reading but found another statement written down. The girl looks up to see another student get on the bus before looking back down to her book. Now I was getting scared. I didn't know what was happening. This continued on for the next hour or so till the bus was filled with voices from students. I read another page of the book and found another sentence. The bus drops the students off at school, all except one, who runs to the front of the bus and looks out her bedroom window to find the bus leaving for school. I closed the book in fright and got up and ran to the front of the bus, only to look down and see the bus picking up students at the bus stop and leaving. I went to school the next day and to the library and returned the book, only to be told by the librarian that I had no record of taking out any book. This has had me wondering what happened to the book and where it had gone to. This will be short, but it's happened in the same place about half the time I drive through here. Back when I was 16, I had a boyfriend who lived almost 40 miles away from me. The drive from my house to his would usually take 45 minutes. This was before texting existed. One weekend, I got permission to go stay with my boyfriend, after our parents talked and made sure I would be sleeping on the couch by myself. So I called his house right before I left to let him know I was on my way. I took the usual drive, staying at the speed limit and enjoying the view. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. No weird light or fog or even a feeling. I pulled up to his house and started to gather my stuff when his mum came out and went pale. She said, "You're not supposed to be here yet." I asked her what she meant as we walked into the house. She replied, "You left 20 minutes ago and are already here? How fast did you drive?" I told her I stayed at the speed limit, even on the long dirt road. But sure enough, the clocks in the house and my watch all showed the same time. I was there more than 20 minutes early. I have no explanation, but I've driven that same hill with other people and it's happened. Ever since that first time, going over the one particular hill will cut 20 minutes off my drive, on average 4 out of 10 times. I wish I knew what was going on. Is there a section of frozen time where I'm aware of the landscape passing but time isn't actually moving? Do I jump through time? Is there something relativistic going on? I likely will never know. But until then, I'll enjoy being 20 minutes early for about half of my drives.
Hello, watchers and listeners. Thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below. So feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.